La 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 la. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel again today. My name is Priscilla and I'm going to be running through 10 of my frequently used sewing terms. So I realized when I was filming my last DIY tutorial that there were a lot of things I was trying to explain, and it dawned on me that words such as notches, facing, grain lines, things like that are not terms that you use in normal everyday conversation. So people might not even know what I'm trying to talk about. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining 10 of them, 10 of my most commonly used sewing terms to you guys. So when I film a DIY tutorial next time, you actually understand what I am trying to say. I am not a certified pattern master or teacher, but I'm just passing the knowledge I have across, and I stand corrected in any way, shape or form. So if you'd like to hear what these terms are and what they mean, keep watching. If this is your first time seeing me, welcome to the fam. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notified every single week whenever I have a new video up. Like, how cool and awesome is that? So without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about, and which is something I emphasize a lot on recently in my sewing tutorials, is notches. So you create notches between two pieces of patterns that you want to connect together, and this is really useful, especially if you're going to have like a lot of pattern pieces. In the front, you normally just notch your point with one single notch. You just notch your point with one single knot, and at the back you notch it with two. So that's a way to tell what pieces belong to the front and what pieces belong to the back. So let me show you a very good example of how notches sort of connect between patterns. So these are two pattern pieces here, and these patterns are from my previous tutorial about the DIY blazer. And as you can see, the waistline here goes from this pattern onto that pattern. It's also important to notch the waistline on the separate pieces in as much as they both exist on them. So what you would do is lay them against each other and mark the points. Lay them flat and then just mark your notches, so you know when you stitch these two pieces together like this, this is where they should meet. Term number 2 is the term called selvage. And what a selvage is the edge of a fabric. So normally when you buy fabrics, they come in like length by width, and usually the length is longer than the width. So the edge of those widths is called a selvage, and they're usually put in place to prevent fabrics from unraveling or from losing. And it's really important when you have to place fabric pattern pieces on a piece of fabric, you can measure the grain line using the selvage of a fabric. So as I mentioned earlier on, grain lines are parallel to the selvage of a fabric, but you have the lengthwise grain line which runs parallel to the selvage, but you also have the crosswise grain line which runs perpendicular. Ooh, look at me dropping terms to the selvage. So I'm just going to put up pictures and illustrations so it's kind of easy to follow. Where I intern right now, my boss would actually make us use a ruler to ensure the grain line of the pattern matches the grain line of the fabric. That's important. That's how important grain lines are. And why they're really useful is because when you join the pieces of the garment together, they all fall in the same direction because they were all cut along the same grain line, except you want to have a bias cut or you want to experiment with shapes on the fabric. Usually you always cut patterns along the grain line. Grain lines are your best friends. Be friends with them, be friends with grain, and be friends with the line, and your life will be a whole lot more easier, believe me. The next term is darts or darts. So darts are used to take in excesses from different points of the garment. Because our bodies are not flat, we have three-dimensional bodies, especially as women. You have the curve in the front in shape of your bust, you have hips, you have your tiny waist, and when you cut fabric, they're usually flat. So in a way to sort of make these garments fit you even better, darts were created. So you usually have darts around your bust line, around your hip line, around your elbow, because these are points that are curved, and in order for these garments to fit better, darts are used. The next thing I'll be talking about is seam allowance. So you would normally add seam allowance all around the pattern piece because the idea is you're going to join that pattern piece to another one. So the seam allowance is usually 1 centimeter. When I was back home in Nigeria, it was like an inch, which is a lot, but here is just 1 centimeter, and you would attach a piece of fabric to another piece of fabric on a 1 centimeter seam allowance. The term facing is used to describe an identical piece of pattern that goes with another one. So what facings are basically is what you would sew around the edge of maybe a neckline or an armhole or a hem or a pocket, and then you usually would press it inward, so when that place is pressed nice and neat, you have a nicely finished seam and you don't see any threads, you don't see any rough edges. So facings so facings are a great way to finish up seams, and you would usually interline them or fuse them so they are stable and they will stay inside of the garment. So in my last tutorial, for example, the lapel of a jacket usually has a facing, which is what folds outwards, and you see when it's like nicely flat on your body. So facings are very important if you want to finish the seams of your garment really beautifully. This is a typical example of a facing, and this is a facing that goes on the front of the jacket that I made in my last tutorial, and it goes all the way to the shoulder because it's to join the back facing of the garment. So this is the front piece, and the facing would be joined along this line, as you can see here. So when this is turned around, this part doesn't have any like thread or rough edges. It's just nice and neat, and it looks really, really good. It's a very professional way to finish garments. So the next term is the word interlining, which I know the way I use the word interlining, what I mean is there is this material which has double sides. One side is sticky and the other side is smooth, and you would normally use interlining to stiffen facings or parts of garments that you want to be a bit more stable and you just want a bit more weight on them. So interlinings have different weights. There's some that are stretchy depending on the kind of fabric you want to put it on. So if your main material is a jersey material, which is stretchy, you would want to get a stretchy interlining to go with that. But if it's a woven material, you want to get a woven interlining, and there are different thicknesses as well as weight. So this is the interlining I have, and it's quite like a very random piece, but anyways, this side is sticky and this side is smooth, and the way it works is you press the sticky side onto the wrong side of the fabric, and the smooth side is what is left. So you have the smooth side of the interlining and the right side of the fabric to form the end product that you want to have. So I would normally use this around waistbands, around facings, around pockets, around hems, on parts of garments where I just want it to stay put and not sort of move around over time. So the process of attaching interlining to a material is called fusing, and you would normally do that with like an iron. You don't use steam to fuse interlining to materials because you're going to dissolve the gum that is on this side of the fabric. So you would just use like a really not too hot but a hot iron to press on this side, not the side that has the glue, on the smooth side, and you press it onto the wrong side of the fabric. That process is called fusing. So a term I used in my last video or in the few tutorials I've made is to ease a material into another one. Ease is the difference between the body measurement and the garment measurement, and it's created in fashion or in construction, so you can easily move in the garment. So sleeves, for example, always have ease, so you can easily like move your hand all the way around, and you can lift it up and lift it down without it ripping or tearing. So sleeves and hip lines and parts of garments where there's a lot of movement usually have ease. And what makes ease or easing into fabrics a bit tricky is because one pattern piece is usually bigger than the other. So the term easing into means slightly stretching the smaller one to fit the bigger one. So they kind of go together. So when you wear it on, there's a little bit of room in that garment for you to move around when you wear the garment. So I would always struggle in uni to ease sleeves into armholes. Oh my god, it was like the worst thing. There are like techniques in place to help that, but it's not something that you just do like very easily. You have to like take your time and do it slowly, but once you get it right, oh, that garment would be so nice to like move in, stretching, and without it like ripping or tearing. I believe the last term for this video is the term bias. So when you hear the word bias, for example, in typical English dictionary, it means someone that's unfair or someone that isn't being sincere, sort of. Let's just stick with unfair for now. But anyways, in pattern cutting, what it means by cutting on a bias is you cut the pattern 45 degrees from the grain line, and the bias usually has the most stretch in the fabric. So if you want to cut the part of a garment where you want movement or where you want like stretch to be, you would most likely cut it on a bias. And if you cut something on the bias, it doesn't fall the same way as another piece that you would cut on the grain line. They would behave slightly differently, but at that point you intentionally cut that piece on the bias because you wanted that feature to do something else. So those are all my terms for this video. I hope I was able to explain them as best and as much as possible to your understanding. So I'd love to know your thoughts down below, and I would just love to know what you guys think about this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you beauties in my next video. So until the next one, have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.